keep yourself on mute, that would be good.
Hey, Duncan,
Yes, sir, David.
just before we start, can I throw in a leftover from 2 weeks ago that I forgot to mention last week? It's about the Aeolus chapter. Or have we invoked closure on that chapter?
No, there's no invoking of closure. But let me go ahead and just make my
Absolutely.
introductory YouTube introduction, and then I will mention that we are going to
Right on.
have a little discussion on something about Aeolus before we go on to read. Okay, so anybody who's watching this on YouTube, we're continuing our Thursday readings of Ulysses. The major focus of today will be the Scylla and Charybdis reading, also known as episode 9. But before we go to that, we have some matter concerning Aeolus, which one of our readers is going to bring up now. All right,
I,
David, take it away.
I hope you're not waiting for the earth to tremble because it won't happen. But I think you might find this interesting. And I just forgot to talk about it last week. So I did a word search in Aeolus, and there are 13 mentions of some form of the word wind.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's so much rhetoric in that chapter, you tend to miss things. And I sort of on a whim did this word search. And so there are words like it could be wind, windbag, whirlwind, but 13 mentions of it. So, in terms of the title, which he gave it in, I think, the Linnaeus scheme, it was well
Mm-hmm.
chosen because he certainly plants a lot of windy words in a very windy chapter.
Yes, yes, and this like many of the chapters, it involves a lot of rhetorical devices.
Right.
He's very clever. I mean, that just those have kept many, many scholars busy. And they're, I always like to say that on one level, Ulysses is in Ulysses, Joyce is training us in rhetorical techniques.
Yes.
And I think this is particularly important in the modern day where actually rhetoric is pretty much ignored or even denigrated. I mean, if you tell someone that they're just being rhetorical, that's a kind of insult. But in reality, in Shakespeare's day, and even partially in Joyce's day, rhetoric was still very, very important for good reason. And the older I get, the more I wish that we had more training in rhetoric. But we're lucky enough that Joyce is actually doing that for us. And when we discover this, if we have the interest, we can actually uh, consciously get into it. So I'll show you this book. This is a nice little book as a kind of guide to techniques in
Okay.
Ulysses, and it has a lot to say about rhetoric and also Don, I think it's Don Gibson's notes on Ulysses also has a lot of rhetorical techniques. There it is. Thank you. That is, I believe, the second edition you have in your hand. There is a slightly newer edition, but they're essentially the same. Okay, all that being said, let me frame today. This is all going to take place in the National Library in Dublin. This is not an easy episode. And it gets quite, uh, has a lot of flourishes in it as we find Stephen Dedalus presenting his infamous analysis of Hamlet. So don't be surprised. He gets very tricky and he is putting everybody on and all this stuff. All that being said, on we go. Urbane. To comfort them, the Quaker librarian heard. And we have we not, these priceless pages of Meister Wilhelm, a great poet on a great brother hesitating soul taking arms against a sea of troubles, torn by conflicting doubts as one sees in real life. He came with a step, a syncopace forward, on Neat's leather creaking, and a step backward, a syncopace on the solemn floor. A noiseless attendant, setting open the door but slightly, made him a noiseless beck. Directly, he said, creaking to go, albeit lingering. The beautiful, ineffectual dreamer who comes to grief against hard facts. One always feels that Goethe's judgments are so true, true in the larger analysis. Twice creakingly analysis he carantos off, bald. Most zealous by the door, he gave his large ear all to the attendant's words, heard them, and was gone. Joe.
Left. Monsieur de la Palisse, Stephen sneered, was alive 15 minutes before his death. Have you found those 6 brave medicals? John Eglinton asked with elder's gall, to write Paradise Lost at your dictation. The sorrows of Satan, he calls it. Smile. Smile, Cranley's smile. First he tickled her, then he patted her, then he passed the female catheter, for he was a medical, jolly old med. I feel you would need one more for Hamlet. 7 is dear to the mystic mind. The shining 7, W.B. calls them. Glitter-eyed. His rufous skull, close to his green-capped desk lamp, sought the face, bearded amid dark greener shadow, an olive, holy-eyed. He laughed a low, a sizar's laugh of Trinity, unanswered. Orchestral Satan weeping many a rude, tears such as angels weep. Et declidavi del culfato tombetta. He holds my follies hostage. Cranley's 11 true Wicklow men, to free their Saarland, gap-toothed Kathleen, her 4 beautiful green fields, the stranger in her house, and one more to hail him, Ave, Rabbi, the Tinahely 12. In the shadow of the glen he cooees for them. My soul's youth I gave him, night by night. Godspeed, good hunting. Susan.
Sorry, it's gotten a lot noisier here in the snowstorm.
You're fine so far.
Okay. Tears, sorry, orchestral Satans, weeping many a rude, tears such as angels weep. Ed egli avea del cufatum tombetta. He holds my follies hostage. Cranley's 11 true Wicklemen to free their sireland. Gap-toothed Kathleen, her 4 beautiful green fields, the stranger in her house, and one more to hail him, Ave Rabbi, the Healy 12. In the shadow of the glen, he cooees for them. My soul's youth I gave him, night by night. Godspeed, good hunting. Mulligan has my telegram. Folly, persist. Our young Irish bards, John Eglinton censured, have yet to create a figure which the world will set beside Saxon Shakespeare's Hamlet, though I admire him as old Ben did on this side idolatry. All these questions are purely academic. Russell oracled out of his shadow. I mean, whether Hamlet is Shakespeare or James I or Essex, clergymen's discussions of the historicity of Jesus. Art has to reveal to us ideas, formless spiritual essences. The supreme question about a work of art is out of how deep a life does it spring. The painting of Gustave Moreau is the painting of ideas. The deepest poetry of Shelley, the words of Hamlet, bring our minds into contact with the eternal wisdom, Plato's world of ideas. All the rest is the speculation of schoolboys for schoolboys. A.E. has been telling some Yankee interviewer, "Walt, our nations strike me. The schoolmen were schoolboys first." Stephen said super politely, "Aristotle was once Plato's schoolboy, and has remained so, one should hope." John Eglinton sedately said, "One can see him, a model schoolboy, with his diploma under his arm." He laughed again at the now smiling bearded face. Formless spiritual, Father, Word, and Holy Breath, all Father, the heavenly man. Jesus Christos, the magician of the beautiful, the Logos who suffers in us at every moment. This verily is that. I am the fire upon the altar. I am the sacrificial butter. Next.
Dunlop, judge, the noblest Roman of them all, A.E. Arval, the name ineffable, in heaven height, K.H. their master, whose identity is no secret to adepts. Brothers of the great white lodge, always watching to see if they can help. And Christ, with the bride's sister, moisture of light, born of an ensouled virgin, resplendent Sophia, departed on the plain of Booty. The life esoteric is not for the ordinary person. O.P. must work off bad karma first. Mrs. Cooper Oakley once glimpsed our very illustrious sister H.P.V.'s elemental. O5, out on't. You Norton to look, missus. So you Norton when a lady's showing off her elemental. Mr. Best entered, tall, young, mild, light. He bore in his hand with grace a notebook, a new, large, clean, bright. That model schoolboy, Stephen said, would find Hamlet's musings about the afterlife of his princely soul, the improbable, insignificant, and undramatic monologue, as shallow as Plato's. John Eglinton, frowning, said, waxing wroth, "Upon my word, it makes my blood boil to hear anyone compare Aristotle with Plato." Which of the two, Stephen asked, would have banished me from his commonwealth? Unsheathe your dagger definitions. Horseness is the whatness of all horse. Streams of tendency and eons they worship. God, noise in the street, very peripatetic. Space, what you damn well have to see. Through spaces smaller than red globules of man's blood, they creepy crawl. After Blake's buttocks into eternity, of which this vegetable world is but a shadow. Hold to the new, the here, through which all future plunges to the past. Mr. Best came forward, amiable, towards his colleague. Haynes is gone, he said. Is he? I was showing him Jubainville's book. He's quite enthusiastic, don't you know, about Hyde's love songs of Connaught. I couldn't bring him in to hear the discussion. He's gone to Gill's to buy it. Next.
Bound thee forth, my booklet, quick to greet the callous public. Writ, I ween, 'twas not my wish, in lean, unlovely English. The peat smoke is going to his head, John Eglinton opined. We feel in England, penitent thief. Gone, I smoked his baccy, green twinkling stone, an emerald set in the ring of the sea. People do not know how dangerous love songs can be. The auric egg of Russell warned occultly. The movements which work revolutions in the world are born out of the dreams and visions in a peasant's heart on the hillside. For them, the earth is not an exploitable ground, but the living mother. The rarefied air of the academy and the arena produced the 6-shilling novel, the music hall song. France produced the finest flower of corruption in Mallarmé, but the desirable life is revealed only to the poor of heart, the life of Homer's Phaeacians. Next, please.
From these words, Mr. Best turned an unoffending face to Stephen. Mallarmé, don't you know, he said, has written those wonderful prose poems Stephen McKenna used to read to me in Paris. The one about Hamlet, he says, Il se promène lisant au livre de lui-même, don't you know, reading the book of himself. He describes Hamlet given in a French town, don't you know, a provincial town. They advertised it. His free hand graciously wrote tiny signs in the air. Hamlet, ou le distrait pièce de Shakespeare. He repeated to John Eglinton's new-gathered frown. Pièce de Shakespeare, don't you know? It's so French. French point of view. Hamlet, ou... The absent-minded beggar, Stephen ended. John Eglinton laughed. Yes, I suppose it could be, he said. Excellent people, no doubt, but distressingly short-sighted in some matters. Sumptuous and stagnant exaggeration of murder. A deathsman of the soul, Robert Greene called him, Stephen said. Not for nothing was he a butcher's son, wielding the sledded poleaxe and spitting in his palm. 9 lives are taken off for his father's one. Our father who art in purgatory. Khaki Hamlets don't hesitate to shoot. The blood-boltered shambles in Act 5 is a forecast of the concentration camp sung by Mr. Swinburne. Cranley, I mute his orderly, following battles from afar. Whelps and dams of murderous foes, for whom none but we had spared. Between the Saxon smile and the Yankee yelp, the devil and the deep sea. Next, please.
He will have it that Hamlet is a ghost story, John Eglinton said, for my best before. Like the fat boy in Pickwick, he wants to make our flesh creep. List, oh list. My flesh hears him, creeping hears. If thou didst ever. What is a ghost? Stephen said with tingling energy. One who has faded into impalpability through death, through absence, through change of manners. Elizabethan London lay as far from Stratford as crabbed Paris lies from virgin Dublin. Who is a ghost from limbo Padrum, returning to the world that has forgotten him? Who is King Hamlet? John Eglinton shifted his spare body, leaning back to judge. Lifted. It is this hour of a day in mid-June, Stephen said, begging with a swift glance their hearing. The flag is up on the playhouse by the bankside. The beer circus lounged in the pit near it, Paris Garden. Canvas climbers who sailed with Drake chewed their sausages among the groundings. Local color, work in all you know, make them accomplices. Shakespeare has left the Huguenot's house in Silver Street and walks by the swan meads along the riverbank, but he does not stay to feed the pen chivvying her game of cygnets towards the rushes. The swan of Avon has other thoughts. Composition of the place. Ignatius Loyola, make haste to help me. Next, please.
The play begins. A player comes on under the shadow, made up in the cast-off mail of a court buck, a well-set man with a bass voice. It is the ghost, the king, a king and no king, and the player is Shakespeare, who has studied Hamlet all the years of his life, were not vanity in order to play the part of the spectre. He speaks the words to Burbage, the young player who stands before him beyond the rack of cray-cloth, calling him by a name. Hamlet, I am thy father's spirit, bidding him list. To a son as he speaks, the son of his soul, the prince, young Hamlet, and to the son of his body, Hamlet, Shakespeare, who has died in Stratford, that his namesake may live forever. Is it possible that the player Shakespeare, a ghost by absence and in the vesture of buried Denmark, a ghost by death, speaking his own words to his own son's name? Had Hamlet Shakespeare lived, he would have been Prince Hamlet's twin. Is it possible? I want to know, or probable, that he did not draw or foresee the logical conclusion of those premises. You are the dispossessed son. I am the murdered father. Your mother is the guilty queen. Anne Shakespeare, born Hathaway. But this prying into the family life of a great man, Russell began impatiently. Art thou there, Truepenny? Interesting only to the parish clerk. I mean, we have the plays. I mean, when we read the poetry of King Lear, what is it to us how the poet lived? As for living, our servants can do that for us. Villiers the Eel has said, peeping and prying into green room gossip of the day, the poet's drinking, the poet's debts, we have King Lear, and it is immortal. Mr. Best's face appealed too, agreed. Flow over then with your waves and your waters, Menon. Menon Baclair, how now, sirrah, the pound he lent you when you were hungry. Marry, I wanted it. Take thou this noble. Go to. You spent most of it, Georgina Johnson's bed, clergyman's daughter, egg and bite of Inwith. Did you intend to pay it back? Oh, yes. When? Now? Well, no. Well then. I paid my way, I paid my way. Steady on, is far from beyond Boyne Water, the northeast corner. You owe it. Next, please.
Wait, 5 months, molecules all change. I am other I now. Other I got pound. Buzz buzz. But I, entelechy form of forms, am I by memory because under ever-changing forms? I that sinned and prayed and fasted. A child conned me, saved from the pandies. I, and I, A-E, I-O-U. Do you mean to fly in the face of the tradition of 3 centuries? John Eglinton's carping voice asked. Her ghost at least has been laid forever. She died, for literature at least, before she was born. She died, Stephen retorted, 67 years after she was born. She saw him into and out of the world. She took his first embraces. She bore his children and laid pennies on his eyes to keep the eyelids closed when he lay on his deathbed. Mother's deathbed. Candle. The sheeted mirror. Who brought me into this world lies there, bronze-lidded, under a few cheap flowers. Liliata rutilantium. I wept alone. John Eglinton looked in the tangled glowworm of his lamp. The world believes that Shakespeare made a mistake, he said, and got out of it as quickly and best he could. Bosh, said Stephen rudely. A man of genius makes no mistakes. His errors are volitional and are the portals of discovery. Portals of discovery open to let in the Quaker librarian, soft creep-footed, bald-eared, and assiduous. A shrewd John Eglinton said shrewdly, a shrew, John Eglinton said shrewdly, is not a useful portal of discovery. one should imagine. What useful discovery did Socrates learn from Xanthippe? Dialectic, Stephen answered. And from his mother, how to bring thoughts into the world. What did he learn from his other wife, Myrtle, absit nomen? Socratidion's Epipsychidion, no man, not a woman, will ever know. But neither the midwife's lore nor the caudal lectures saved him from the archons of Sinn Fein and their nagging of hemlock. But Anne Hathaway, Mr. Best's quiet voice said forgetfully. Yes, we seem to be forgetting her, as Shakespeare himself forgot her. His look went from Bruder's beard to Carper's skull, to remind, to chide them not unkindly, then to the bald pink Lollard costard, guiltless though maligned. Katrina?
Got it. He had a good groat's worth of wit, Stephen said, and no truant memory. He carried a memory in his wallet as he trudged to Romeville, whistling The Girl I Left Behind Me. If the earthquake did not time it, we should know where to place poor Watt, sitting in his form, the cry of hounds, a studded bridle, and her blue windows. That memory, Venus and Adonis, lay in the bedchamber of every light of love in London. Is Catherine the shrew ill-favored? Hortensio calls her young and beautiful. Do you think the writer of Antony and Cleopatra, a passionate pilgrim, had his eyes in the back of his head, that he chose the ugliest doxy in all Warwickshire to lie withal? Good, he left her and gained the world of men. But his boy woman and the woman are the woman of a boy. Their life, thought, speech are lent them by males. He chose badly. He was chosen, it seems to me. If others have their will, Anne hath a way. By cock she was to blame. She put the come hither on him sweet in 26. The gray-eyed goddess who bends over the boy Adonis, stooping to conquer, as prologue to the swelling act, is a bold-faced Stratford wench who tumbles in a cornfield, a lover younger than herself. And my turn. When? Come. Next, please.
Ryfield, Mr. Bress said brightly, gladly, raising his new book, gladly, brightly. He murmured then with blonde delight, for all between the acres of the rye these pretty country folk would lie. Paris, the well-pleased pleaser. A tall figure in bearded homespun rose from shadow and unveiled its cooperative watch. I'm afraid I am due at the homestead. Whither away? Exploitable ground. Are you going? John Eglinton, active eyebrows, asked. Shall we see you at Moore's tonight? Piper is coming. Piper, Mr. Best piped. Is Piper back? Peter Piper pecked a peck of pickled peppers. I don't know if I can. Thursday, we have our meeting. If I can get away in time. Yogi Bogey box in Dawson Chambers, ices unveiled. Their polybook we tried to pawn. Cross-legged under an umbershoot, he thrones an Aztec logos, functioning and astral levels, their oversoul, Mahatma. The faithful hermeticist await the light, ripe for fellowship. Ring around about him. Louis H. Victory, T. Caulfield Aaron. Lotus ladies tend them ere the eyes, their pineal glands aglow. Filled with his god he thrones, bud under plantain. Golfer of souls, engulfer, he souls, she souls, shoals of souls, engulfed with waiting three cries, whirling, they bewail. In quintessential triviality, for years in this flesh case a sea soul dwelt. They say we are to have a literary surprise, the Quaker librarian said, friendly and earnest. Mr. Russell, rumor has it, is gathering together a sheaf of our younger poets' verses. We are all looking forward anxiously. Anxiously, he glanced at the cone of lamplight where three faces lighted shone. See this. Remember. Next.
Stephen looked down on a wide, headless carbine, hung on his ash plant handle over his knee. My casque and sword. Touch lightly with 2 index fingers. Aristotle's experiment. 1 or 2. Necessity is that in virtue of which it is impossible that one can be otherwise. Argal. 1 hat is 1 hat. Listen. Young Colm and Starkey. George Roberts is doing the commercial part. Longworth will give it a good puff in the Express. Oh, will he? I liked Colm's Drover. Yes, I think he has that queer thing, genius. Do you think he has genius, really? Yeats admired his line, as in wild earth the Grecian vase. Did he? I hope you'll be able to come tonight. Malachy Mulligan is coming too. Moore asked him to bring Haynes. Did you hear Miss Mitchell's joke about Moore and Martin? That Moore is Martin's wild oats? Awfully clever, isn't it? They remind one of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. Our national epic has yet to be written, Dr. Sigerson says. Moore is the man for it, a knight of the rueful countenance here in Dublin. With a saffron kilt, O'Neill Russell. Oh yes, he must speak the grand old tongue. And is Dulcinea? James Stephens is doing some clever sketches. We are becoming important, it seems. Cordelia, Cordolio, Lear's loneliest daughter. Nookshotten. Now your best French polish. Thank you very much, Mr. Russell, Stephen said, rising. If you will be so kind as to give the letter to Mr. Norman. Oh, yes, if he considers it important, it will go in. We have so much correspondence. I understand, Stephen said. Thanks. God ills you, that pig's paper, bullock befriending. Singh has promised me an article for Dana too. Are we going to be read? I feel we are. The Gaelic League wants something in Irish. I hope you will come round tonight. Bring Starkey. Stephen sat down. The Quaker librarian came from the leave takers. Blushing his mask, said, Mr. Daedalus, your views are most illuminating. He creaked to and fro, tiptoeing up nearer heaven by the altitude of its shop line, and, covered by the noise of outgoing, said low, Is it your view, then, that she was not faithful to the poet? Alarmed face asks me, Why did he come? Courtesy or an inward light? Why, there's a reconciliation, Stephen said. There must have been a sundering. Yes. Christ fox in leather trews, hiding a runaway in blighted tree forks from hue and cry, knowing no vixen, walking lonely in the chase. Women he won to him, tender people, a whore of Babylon, ladies of justice, bully tapsters' wives, fox and geese, and in new place a slack dishonoured body that once was comely, once as sweet, as fresh as cinnamon, now her leaves falling, all bare, frighted of the narrow grave, and unforgiven. Yes. So you think the door closed behind the outgoer. Susan.
Me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Rest suddenly possessed the discreet vaulted cell rest of warm and brooding air, a vestal's lamp. Here he ponders things that were not, what Caesar would have lived to do had he believed the soothsayer, what might have been, possibilities of the possible as possible, things not known, what name Achilles bore when he lived among women. Coffin thoughts around me, in mummy cases, embalmed in spice of words. Thoth, god of libraries, a bird god, moony crowned. And I heard the voice of that Egyptian high priest in painted chambers loaded with tile books. They are still, once quick in the brains of men, still, but an itch of death is in them, to tell me in my ear a maudlin tale, urge me to wreak their will. Certainly, John Eglinton mused, of all great men, he is the most enigmatic. We know nothing but that he lived and suffered, not even so much. Others abide our question. A shadow hangs over all the rest. But Hamlet is so personal, isn't it? Mr. Best pleaded. I mean, a kind of private paper, don't you know, of his private life. I mean, I don't care a button, don't you know, who is killed or who is guilty. He rested an innocent book on the edge of the desk, smiling his defiance. His private papers in the original, Time bad Arantir, Time in Moshagard. Put Burla on it, Little John. Quoth Little John Eglinton. I was prepared for paradoxes from what Malachi Mulligan told us, but I may as well warn you that if you want to shake my belief that Shakespeare is Hamlet, you have a stern task before you. Bear with me. Stephen withstood the bane of miscreant eyes glinting stern under wrinkled brows, a basilisk, e quando vedo l'uomo la tosca. Messer Brunetti, I thank thee for the word. As we, or Mother Dana, weave and unweave our bodies, Stephen said, from day to day, their molecules shuttle to and fro, so does the artist weave and unweave his image. And as the mole on my right breast is where it was when I was born, though all my body has been woven of new stuff time after time, so through the ghost of the unquiet father, the image of the unliving son looks forth. In the intense instant of imagination, when the mind, Shelley says, is a fading coal, that which I was is that which I am, and that which in possibility I may come to be. So in the future, the sister of the past, I may see myself as I sit here now, but by reflection from that which then I shall be. Next, please.
Drummond of Hawthornden helped you at the style. Yes, Mr. Best said youngly. I feel Hamlet quite young. The bitterness might be from the father, but the passages with Ophelia are surely from the son. Has the wrong sow by the lug? He is in my father. I am in his son. That mole is the last to go, Stephen said, laughing. John Eglinton made a nothing pleasant mow. If there were a birthmark of genius, he said, genius would be a drug in the market. The plays of Shakespeare's later years, which Reed admired so much, breathe another spirit. The spirit of reconciliation, the Quaker librarian breathed. There can be no reconciliation, Stephen said, if there has not been a sundering. Said that. If you want to know what are the events which cast their shadow over the hell of time of King Lear, Othello, Hamlet, Troilus, and Cressida, look to see when and how the shadow lifts. What softens the heart of a man, shipwrecked in storms dire, tried like another Ulysses, Pericles, Prince of Tyre. Head, red cone capped, buffeted, brine blinded. A child, A girl placed in his arms, Marina. The leading of sophists towards the bypaths of Apocrypha is a constant quantity, John Eglinton detected. The high roads are dreary, but they lead to the town. Good bacon, good musty. Shakespeare, Bacon's wild oats. Cipher juggers along the high roads. Seekers on a great quest. What town, good masters? Mummed in names. A.E., Eon, McGee, John Eglinton, east of the sun, west of the moon. Ternanog, booted the twain and stayed. How many miles to Dublin? 70, sir. Will we be there by candlelight? Mr. Brandes accepts it, Stephen said, as the first play of the closing period. Does he? What does Mr. Stanley, Sidney Lee, or Mr. Simon Lazarus, as some aver his name and say of it? Marina, Stephen said, a child of the storm. Miranda, a wonder. Perdita, that which was lost. What was lost is given back to him, his daughter's child. My dearest wife, Pericles says, was like this maid. Will any man love the daughter if he has not loved the mother? The art of being a grandfather, Mr. Best can murmur. Lord de Crump, will he not see reborn in her, with the memory of his own youth added, another image? Do you know what you were talking about? Love, yes. Word known to all men. Amor vero alicad alicui bonum vult unde et aeque concupiscimus. Next.
His own image to a man with that queer thing genius is the standard of all experience, material and moral. Such an appeal will touch him. The images of other males of his blood will repel him. He will see in them grotesque attempts of nature to foretell or repeat himself. The benign forehead of the Quaker librarian enkindled rosily with hope. I hope Mr. Dedalus will work out his theory for the enlightenment of the public. And we ought to mention another Irish commentator, Mr. George Bernard Shaw. Nor should we forget Mr. Frank Harris. His articles on Shakespeare in the Saturday Review were surely brilliant. Oddly enough, he too draws for us an unhappy relation with the dark lady of the sonnets. The favourite rival is William Herbert, Earl of Pembroke. I own that if the poet must be rejected, such a rejection would seem more in harmony with, what shall I say, our notions of what ought not to have been. Felicitously he ceased and held a meek head among them, hawk's egg, prize of their fray. He thous and these her with grave husband words. Dost love Miriam? Dost love thy man? That may be too, Stephen said. There is this saying of Goethe's, which Mr. McGee likes to quote. Beware of what you wish for in youth, because you will get it in middle life. Why does he send to one who is a buona roba, a bay where all men ride, a maid of honour with a scandalous girlhood, a lordling to woo for him? He was himself a lord of language, and had made himself a coistrel gentleman, and had written Romeo and Juliet. Why? Belief in himself has been untimely killed. He was overborn in a cornfield first, ryefield, I should say, and he will never be a victor in his own eyes after, nor play victoriously the game of laugh and lie down. Assumed Don Giovannism will not save him. No later undoing will undo the first undoing. The tusk of the boar has wounded him there, where love lies the bleeding. If the shrew is worsted, yet there remains to her woman's invisible weapon. There is, I feel in the words, some goad of the flesh driving him into a new passion, a darker shadow of the first, darkening even in his own understanding of himself. A like fate awaits him, and the two rages commingle in a whirlpool. they list, and in the porches of the earth I pour. Next, please.
The soul has been before stricken mortally, a poison poured in the porch of a sleeping ear. But those who are done to death in sleep cannot know the manner of their quell, unless their Creator endow their souls with that knowledge in the life to come. Poisoning and the beast with two backs that urged it, King Hamlet's ghost could not know of, were he not endowed with knowledge by his Creator. That is why the speech, his lean, unlovely English, is always turned elsewhere, backward, ravisher and ravished. What he would, but he would not. Go with him from Lucretia's blue-circled ivory globes to Imogen's breast. There, with its mole cinque-spotted, he goes back, weary of the creation he has piled up, to hide himself from himself, an old dog licking an old sore. But because loss is his gain, he passes on towards eternity in undiminished personality, untaught by the wisdom he has written or by the laws he has revealed. His beaver is up. He's a ghost, a shadow now. The wind by Elsinore's rocks, or what you will, the sea's voice, a voice heard only in the heart of him who is the substance of his shadow, the Son consubstantial with the Father. Amen, responded from the doorway. Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? Enter acta. A ribald face, sullen as a dean's, Buck Mulligan came forwards then, blithe and motley, towards the greeting of their smiles. My telegram. You were speaking of the gaseous vertebrate, if I mistake not, he asked of Stephen. Prime rose vested, he greeted gaily with his doffed Panama as with a bauble. They make him welcome. Was du verlackerst wirst du noch dienen. Brood of mockers, Photius, Pseudo-Malachi, Johann Most, he who himself begot, middler of the Holy Ghost, and himself sent himself, Agenbire, between himself and others, who, put upon by his fiends, stripped and whipped, was nailed like a bat to barn door, starved on a cross tree, who let him bury, stood up, harrowed hell, fared into the heaven, and there these 1900 years stood on his right hand of his own self, but yet shall come in the latter day to doom the quick and the dead, when all the quick shall be dead already. Gloria in excelsis Deo. He lifts hands, veils fall. O flowers, bells, with bells acquiring. Yes, indeed, the Quaker librarian said, a most instructive discussion, Mr. Mulligan. I'll be bound. As this theory too of the play and of Shakespeare, all sides of life should be represented. He smiled on all sides equally. Buck Mulligan thought, puzzled. Shakespeare, he said. I seem to know the name. A flying, sunny smile rayed in those loose features. To be sure, he said, remembering brightly. The chap that writes like sing. Mr. Best turned to him. Haynes missed you, he said. Did you meet him? He'll see you after at the BBC. He's gone to Gill's to buy Hyde's Love Songs of Connacht. I came through the museum, Buck Mulligan said. Was he here? The bard's fellow countryman, John Eglinton, answered, are rather tired, perhaps, of our brilliancies of theorizing. I hear that an actress plays Hamlet for the 408th time last night in Dublin. Vining held that the prince was a woman, as no one made him out to be an Irishman. Judge Barton, I believe, is searching for some clues. He swears His Highness, not his Lordship, by St. Patrick. The most brilliant of all is that story of Wiles, Mr. Betts said, lifting his brilliant notebook, the portrait of Mr. W.H., where he proves that the sonnets were written by a Willie Hughes, a man of all Hughes. For Willie Hughes, is it not? The Quaker librarian asked. or Huey Wills, or Mr. William himself, W.H. Who am I? Next, please.
I mean, for Willie Hughes, Mr. Best said, amending his clothes easily. Of course, it's all paradox, don't you know? Hues and hues and hues, the color. But it's so typical the way he works it out. It's the very essence of wild, don't you know? The light touch. His glance touched their faces lightly as he smiled. A blonde effie, tame essence of wild. You are darned witty. 3 drums of whiskey ball. You drank with them these ducats. How much did I spend? Oh, a few shillings. For a plump of placement, humor red and dry. Wit, you'd give your 5 bits for your proud livery, he pranks in. Lineaments of gratified desire. There be many more. Take her for me. In pairing time, Job, a cool Latin, sent them. Yeah, turtled up her. Eve, naked, wheat-bellied thing, a snake coils her, fanging kiss. Do you think it is only a paradox? The Quaker librarian was asking. The mocker is never taken seriously when he is most serious. They talked seriously of Mocker's seriousness. Buck Mulligan's again heavy face eyed Stephen a while. Then, his head wagging, he came near, drew a folded telegram from his pocket, his mobile lips red, smiling with new delight. Telegram, he said, wonderful inspiration. Telegram, a paper blue. He sat on a corner of the unlit desk, reading aloud joyfully. The sentimentalist is he who would enjoy without incurring the immense debtorship for a thing done. Signed, Didas. Where did you launch it from? The Kips? No, College Green. Have you drunk the 4 quid? The aunt is going to call on your unsubstantial father. Telegram, Maraki Mulligan. The ship, Lower Abbey Street. Oh, you peerless murmur. Oh, you pleased fight. Kinted. Joyfully, he thrust message and envelope in the pocket, but keened in querulous brogue. Next, please.
It's what I'm telling you, Mr. Honey. It's queer and sick we are. Haynes and myself, the time himself bought it in. 'Twas murmur we did for a gallus portion whose rouse a friar, I'm thinking, and he limp with leechin'. And now 1 hour and 2 hours and 3 hours in Conroy's sitting civil waiting for pints apiece, he wailed. And we were to be there, Mavroneen, and you to be the unbeknown sending us your conglomeration the way we have our tongues out a yard long, like the droughty clerics to be fainting for a pussful. Stephen laughed. Quickly, wangfully, Buck Mulligan bent down. The tramper Singh is looking for you, he said, to murder you. He heard you pissed on his hall doors in Glastool. He's out in Pamputties to murder you. Me, Stephen exclaimed. That was your contribution to literature. Buck Mulligan gleefully bent back, laughing at the dark, eavesdropping ceiling. Murder you, he laughed. Harsh, gargoyle face that warned against me over our mess of hash, of lights and roofs and Andre de Art. In words for words, palabras, Oisin with Patrick, fond man he met in Clamart Woods, brandishing a wine bottle. Say ventry saint, mother and Irish, his image wandering he met, I mine, I met a fool, I, the forest. Mr. Lister, an attendant said from the door ajar, in which everyone can find his own. So, Mr. Justice Madden, in his Diary of Master William Silence, has found the hunting terms. Yes. What is it? There's a gentleman here, sir, the attendant said, coming forward and offering a card. From the Freeman. He wants to see the files of the Kilkenny people for last year. Certainly, certainly, certainly. Is the gentleman? He took the eager card, glanced, not saw, laid down, unglanced, looked, asked, creaked, asked. Is he? Oh, there. Brisk, in a galliard, he was off and out. In the daylight corridor he talked with voluble pains of zeal, in duty bound, most fair, most kind, most honest board brim. This gentleman, Freeman's Journal, Kilkenny people, to be sure. Good day, sir. Kilkenny? We have certainly. A patient silhouette waited, listening. All the leading provincial, Northern Whig, Cork Examiner, Enniscorthy Guardian, 1903. Will you please, Evans, conduct this gentleman? If you just follow oh, please allow me. This way, please, sir. Voluble, dutiful, he led the way to all the provincial papers, a bowing dark figure following his hasty heels. The door closed. The sheeny Buck Mulligan cried. He jumped up and snatched the card. What's his name? Ikey Moses. Bloom? He rattled on. Next, please.
Jehovah, collector of profusas, is no more. I found him over in the museum where I went to hail the foam-born Aphrodite, the Greek mouth that has never been twisted in prayer. Every day we must do homage to her. Life of life, thy lips enkindle. Suddenly he turned to Stephen. He knows you. He knows your old fellow. Oh, I fear me. He is Greeker than the Greeks. His pale Galilean eyes were laid upon her mesial groove. Venus Callipyge. Oh, the thunder of those loins, the god pursuing the maiden hid. We want to hear more, John Anglican decided with Mr. Best's approval. We begin to be interested in Mrs. S. Till now we'd thought of her, if at all, as a patient Griselda, a Penelope stay-at-home. And Antisthenes, pupil of Gorgias, Stephen said, took the palm of beauty from Kyrios Menelaus's Brudam Argive Helen, the wooden mare of Troy, in whom a score of heroes slept, and handed it to poor Penelope. 20 years he lived in London, and during part of that time drew a salary equal to that of the Lord Chancellor of Ireland. His life was rich. His art, more than the art of feudalism, as Walt Whitman called it, is the art of surfeit. Hot herring pies, green mugs of sack, honey sausages, sugar of roses, marchpane, gooseberry pigeons, ring of candies. Sir Walter Raleigh, when they arrested him, had 500,000 francs on his back, including a pair of fancy stays. The Gombeen woman, Eliza Tudor, had underlinen enough to vie with her of Sheba. 20 years he dallied there between conjugal love and its chaste delights, and the scortiary love and its foul pleasures. You know Manningham's story of the burgher's wife who bade Dick Burbage to her bed after she'd seen him do Richard III, and how Shakespeare, overhearing, without more ado about nothing, took the cow by the horns and, when Burbage came knocking at the gate, answered from the Capen's blankets. William the Conqueror came before Richard III, and the gay lichen mistress Fitton mount and cry oh, and his dainty bird's knees Lady Penelope Rich, a clean quality woman, is suited for a player, and the punks of the bankside, penny at a time. Cours la reine. Encore 20 sous. Nous ferons de petites cochonneries. Minette, tu veux? The height of fine society, and Sir William Davenport of Oxford's of Oxford's mother, with her cup of canary for any cock canary. Buck Mulligan, his pious eyes upturned, prayed, Blessed Margaret Mary Anycock, and Harry of Six Wives' daughter, and the other lady friends from neighbor seats, as Lon Tennyson, gentleman poet, sings. But all those 20 years, what do you suppose poor Penelope in Stratford was doing behind the diamond panes? Do and do, thing done. In a rosary of Fetter Lane, of Gerard Herbalist, he walks, grey-eyed auburn, of azured harebell like her veins, lids of Juno's eyes, violets. He walks, one life is all, one body. Do, but do, afar in a reek of lust and squalor, hands are laid on whiteness. Buck Mulligan rapped John Eglinton's desk sharply. Whom do you suspect? He challenged. Katrina?
Say that he is the spurned lover in the sonnets, once spurned, twice spurned. But the court wanton spurned him for a lord, his dear my love. Love that dare not speak its name. As an Englishman, you mean, John sturdy Eglinton put in. He loved a lord. Old wall where sudden lizards flash. At Charenton I watched them. It seems so, Stephen said, when he wants to do for him and for all other and singular uneared wombs, the holy office an ostler does for the stallion. Maybe like Socrates, they had a midwife to mother as he had a shrew to wife. But she, the giglet wanton, did not break a bed vow. Two deeds are rank in the ghost's mind, a broken vow, and the dull-brained yokel on whom her favor has declined, deceased husband's brother. Sweet Anne, I take it, was hot in the blood, once a wooer, twice a wooer. Stephen turned boldly in his chair. The burden of proof is with you, not with me, he said, frowning. If you deny that in the 5th scene of Hamlet he has branded her with infamy, tell me why there was no mention of her during the 34 years between the day she married him and the day she buried him. All those women saw their men down and under, Mary, her goddamn John, Anne, her poor dear Willin, when he went and died on her, raging that he was the first to go, Joan, her 4 brothers, Judith, her husband, and all her sons, Susan, her husband too, while Susan's daughter Elizabeth, to use granddaddy's words, wed her second, having killed her first. Oh, yes, mention there is. In the years when he was living richly in royal London to pay a debt, she had to borrow 40 shillings from her father's shepherds. Explain you then. Explain the swan song too, wherein he has commended her to posterity. Duncan.
All right, let's go ahead and end the reading here today. We're just right about halfway through the episode, and so it would be too long to go to complete it. And if we stop here, I think we have a good amount for next time.
Good. I have to go, everybody. Thank you very
Yes.
much. See you
Okay,
next
Thank you,
Katrina,
Katrina.
thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Let's see, this is 3. Next week is going to be 3:14.
In Gabler, we finished at 166. We'll start at 167.
Okay, Gabler 167. Wordsworth 182. Other additions, please.
Small Penguin 202.
Penguin Small 202. Okay. Is that it? All right.
No.
I guess that's it. Comments, questions?
I'm going to leave too. I can
Okay.
hardly hear anything anymore. So,
Okay. Well, thank you, Susan, and I hope to see you
Bye,
as soon as
Susan.
possible.
bye.
Hi, Susan.
Bye,
I will
Susan.
next week.
Just a comment, maybe to kick it off. the characters that we're listening to in this episode are very different from those we've listened to in the previous episodes. These are all so-called intellectuals discussing literary things, whereas in previous episodes we've heard people talking about, Luke Bloom looking in on Burton's and watching the animals feed, more like going to the zoo. Whereas here, I feel they're all trying to outstrip each other, and we're suddenly thrown into this. Now, I can't remember Scylla and Charbydis, so I'm not sure what the connection is to the Homeric piece, but I just thought it was strange that we're suddenly thrown into this right in the middle of the book. I mean, we're halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
I thank you for raising that point, Donna. I've always been puzzled by the title, and I'm hoping that somebody can help me out either this week or next. I mean, Scylla was the monster with 6 or 12 heads, and Charybdis was the whirlpool. And I believe that when Odysseus went to the underworld, he was told that it was a narrow passage between the two, and that he had to navigate carefully, but that if he had to go to one side or the other, go towards Scylla, because he'd only lose 12, I think it's 12, crew members, whereas if he went too close to Charybdis, the whirlpool would suck him down. Now, again, with the chapter, I kicked off with the discussion of Aeolus. It's not very hard to see the Homerian parallel there, but here I have a few ideas, but I do struggle a little bit with that. So I appreciate you raising the point, Donna.
I think we'll have to fall back to Joe to give us an explanation. Just pointing the finger, Joe.
Thanks very much for the notice, Tony.
I was afraid you were dozing off, Joe.
No, I that's how I look normally nowadays. Scylla is a 6-headed monster, and Charybdis, like the key to this episode, we just passed from page 178. Stephen is drunk. This is not a serious debate.
Right.
A friend of mine tried to document this he does little playlets from Ulysses, and this has beaten him every time he tries it. And I keep telling him, you're playing it too seriously. This is wind and piss stuff. And he says, oh no, all the sort of, the white shooter at Oxford. I did white Shakespeare at Oxford. Like, this is all rubbish that's been trotted out. It's also at a sequence. Like, for instance, he talks about Shakespeare leaving Silver Street. Silver Street was not known until 1910. So, this is not a serious attempt. It's a novel, and the character in the novel has been drinking. He's had 3 drams of Ishkabaha, that to you and the rest of the world is whiskey. It's 1/8 of a bottle of whiskey neat, right? So that's what he's had to drink. And we would also later on find out his course. You could map it across Dublin. We last saw him in Abbey Street in Mooney's on Veal. And when he finished there, he moved down to, I just can't remember off the cuff, but it's a pub near Trinity College. There used to be a post office there as well. And from there, he sent a telegram to Mulligan, who he had just been a few feet away from, door to pub, and walked past it, and sent him this ridiculous emails, what do they call them, telegrams.
Okay.
And he moved on, I think, to the Moira Hotel, which is gone now, in Trinity Street, and then wanders up to the National Library to meet a bunch of guys he doesn't like.
Did he come up Westland Road?
I don't know.
Okay.
Don't know. But that's the National Library is not the National Library we know and love today. The National Library, well, it's in the same building, but it was it was set up by the strata of society that was in power as a library, a National Library of Ireland, and admittance to it was by invitation. You had to be a member. So the likes of me and Donna would not be let in. And
Oh, really?
yes, well, this is when it was originally, and only fairly recently in terms of Ulysses and Joyce's, with the emancipation and then the setting up of university, walking distance away across Stephen's Green, you have the Royal University, they were condescendingly allowed in, they were invited in. But the National Library of Ireland does not like Yeats and all these nationalist fellas writing rubbish. And
it did strike me as odd that they were all speaking to each other, which in today's National Library you wouldn't be allowed to do.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and matter of courtesy alone, you wouldn't, because there are people seriously working. But this is a room off it. I often think it's behind where the librarian stands. I think there's a little room in there. They might have been in there, and that would explain the in and out of the door. But the other hint Joyce gives you is the opening references to Twelfth Night, Shakespeare's play Twelfth Night.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Corantoing off, and it's the conversation between Sir Andrew Aguecheek, which is Sir Andrew Pain in the Arse, and Sir Toby Belch, these two dignitaries, where one is getting the other to dance. What is it? Belch is getting Sir Andrew Aguecheek, who's come to woo the lady of the house and all this sort of stuff, and he's getting him to show his dancing skills. And can you do the backtick? He higher. You know, it's the start of the play, and he leads Sir Andrew on a merry dance. And Joyce leads us on a merry dance.
Mm-hmm.
There's the warning bells, the Corantos, and but that's the key to it. The allegorical level, if you like, is Scylla. Scylla is a six-headed monster, and as Dave says, Ulysses was cautioned by Circe to sail closer to the Scylla. Now, Scylla is difficult to see, and Odysseus prepares for the trip by the cliff with his full armor on and his weapon ready to cut off one of the six heads, or all six if he gets a chance. And he gets no chance at all. Six men are grabbed. Look for six heads, and you'll see where Scylla is in this story. And in the Odyssey, he says, well, Bill isn't here, he'd be having a conniption, isn't it? But it's the lines in Homer describe the men pleading for their lives and pleading for Odysseus to help them as they are pecked to death by this, each by its own head. You see? And Ulysses says, well, I'm doing this from memory. My memory isn't great, but he says it was the most pitiful thing, worse than anything he met in the war in Troy. And these six heads are pecking Shakespeare to death. That's what's going on. You see? That's Scylla. The Charbydis is the whirlwind, and that's the softly, gently walking Leicester. But at the edge of the whirlpool is where the water is always very calm. And there are two pools going on there. the guy they're all going over to see, George Moore, is a writer, and it's interesting that I think it was it Dave or I can't remember which of us said that these guys are all being polite to each other, but they're kind of doing a line dance of sort of, ready to stab the other, with a comment.
Yeah, they have their knives out waiting for a chance.
Yeah, like Moore is now I can get myself confused in names very simply, but Moore had Moore wrote a short story. I can't remember what it's called, and I had the reference out. But I need to say it as the book was closed on me as usual. But oh yeah, Vain Fortune. George Moore wrote a story called Vain Fortune, which bears a stunning resemblance to The Dead. It's written before The Dead, and it ends up with a man in a room in a hotel looking out through a window, And now nobody reads George Moore anymore, but you can see the little tensions there were there. It's not a patch on The Dead, but you can see how it was done. And he wrote a scathing opinion on Joyce and his writing of Ulysses. So I haven't got it in my head, but sort of or phrase something like a common type from the Dublin Docklands. It's that kind of thing. And then you have William McGee, John Eglinton. John Eglinton is the librarian. And they regard themselves as English. They're Irish men. They're born in Ireland. And this is Joyce taking the mickey out of their national literary saint. And they're not able to answer him. They even throw out, have we had the second best bed yet? And they can't answer, And now Meglington does make she has her right as a widow, her dower, her right of dower, because the law was different back then. No problem with the second best bed, but they McGee was so opposed to Irish nationalism that in 1923, when Ireland got self-government, he left Ireland forever. He went to live in England. That gives you some idea. He gave up his job in the National Library. Moore was an Irishman, but he was of landlord stock. And he was born in Moore Hall over in County Clare. The IRA burnt it out during the War of Independence. And he never came back to Ireland either, you see. So these tensions are running there. But there's a funny story about McGee and Eglinton, as he's known here, and it touches on that, what do you call that society, the Tibetan, the Omar.
Oh, the Blavatsky. You're talking about the Blavatsky?
Yeah, the Blavatsky outfit.
Theosophy?
Yeah?
Theosophy?
The Theosophical Society.
The Theosophical
They were
Society.
in 12 Dawson Street, and James Joyce and Gogarty effected entry to the Theosophical Society when the Theosophical Society was closed. Now, whether that was done with a key or whether they broke the lock, no one knows. And they ransacked it. And they left a note and an item of ladies' underwear saying, "It was me what done this." Signed, William McGee. So, like, nothing ever came of it, but assistant librarian to the National Library breaking into the office. When you say ransacked, I don't know what it means. Maybe they disturbed a few files, or maybe they broke all the. I know what they did. It smacks of something that might happen under the influence of alcohol. But it gives you some idea of what's going on with these characters here. So this is not a serious debate. And
right.
So there you go. That's the allegorical level anyway, Scylla and Charbydis. And I don't know what the Charbydis is, but I take it to be those two whirlpools, the Moor and the McGee. And
okay.
is in danger of getting sucked into both. And meanwhile, he's one of the heads pecking at Shakespeare.
I've got the thing that, like, in the very beginning when they had that little tiff about whether one should think about the author's circumstances and biography and all that, and then you have the one person that says, no, it's only the work that's important. And of course, this is a perennial debate that goes on among literary types. And that in a sense, the only the work is important, at least in my imagination, is kind of the whirlpool.
Yeah.
Where you just go down into the work deeper and deeper, and that the Charybdis, the six heads that bite, is actually when you start talking about their biography and their other influences and all that, that's endless. You can go anywhere with it.
That's good. That's good. That fits in. That fits in as well as a way of saying it. There's no one way of looking on these things.
Yeah, it's multi-leveled. I think another important thing here is to realize, this is my projection, but I think it's reasonable. Stephen Dedalus is pretty angry.
Oh yeah.
Because right in the middle of this whole thing, they're talking about this meeting they're going to have with all the young poets, and Dedalus is not invited.
This is George Moore, you see, around the corner in Ely Place. He doesn't like Joyce. So and Willie McKee was actually interviewed. There's a recording of him speaking about this, and he's a very nice man. He speaks very well. And so he died in 1933, I think. I may have my years wrong, but he died before the Second World War. But he speaks very well, and he remembers the day that Joyce came into the library. And it's the day that he retired from living in the Martello Tower, his six nights in the tower. And he remembers him coming in and wearing a particularly shabby pair of trousers, he says. And he said that he had been thrown out of the tower. And he says, I vaguely remember a conversation, and I may have said something as foolish as is in Ulysses that I said. So it's interesting that's kind of from someone who is there at the moment of inspiration. And you get that it's on radio televisions.
Can I just take issue with something?
Yeah.
I mean, it's Moore and McGee. You said they don't see them as Irish, even though they were born in Ireland. Well, if you're born in Ireland today and your parents aren't Irish, you're not entitled to a passport, and you're not entitled to. And I think it's like desperate that that we live in a country where there are a whole youth generation who may not be entitled to citizenship and may not be entitled to go to college or any of the rights of the other people are. And at the time, Moore and McGee, up until now, I don't know the exact date, and I was talking to somebody about this last week. I think if you were born before April 18th, 1949, when Ireland became a republic, you are still entitled to a British passport.
Yes.
So those, in this time of encouraging peaceful co-relations, people in Northern Ireland at the moment are entitled to dual nationality. And I just think there seems like a lot of different rules at different times. Anyway, so that I went off on a tangent when you were talking about important stuff about McGee and them. But I think it's good to remember all the young people.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people who's entitled to a British passport because I was born before the declaration of the Republic, as it were, in 1949, you know. I've never taken up the offer. I've absolutely no intention. And Joyce never held an Irish passport. He held a British passport.
He always used a British passport, right?
Yeah. And but a lot of Irish people my age, if they're in business, they would get a British passport and they would have an Irish one as well. And then if you were doing business in Israel and in Arab countries, you just had to produce the correct passport or you were in trouble. They'd look for the stamp. Both sides would look for where you'd been. But I certainly never had cause to. But yeah, and I agree with you. And I could extend on that, Orla, what you're saying. I have a personal experience of people that I regard as Irish who cannot get passports. It's a disgrace.
Well,
but
and I think in America, if you're born in the USA, you're entitled to a US passport.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're born in Canada,
that's actually
a US
big
passport.
Yeah, that's a big bone of contention right now, and actually a lot in the Republican Party want to do away with that feature.
Yeah.
But up to now, that is true. If you are born in the United States, even of foreign parents, you are entitled to U.S. citizenship.
I think that is similar here. In fact, again, don't mortgage the house on this. You might want to do some research. But my remembrance is that prior to the treaty about Hong Kong, there were women from Hong Kong who were coming to Canada to have babies here so that the child would qualify for Canadian citizenship in case things went south in Hong Kong, which they kind of have. So, So Orla, I think you're right. It's different here. But again, I think what you have to remember from this side of the pond, and other North Americans maybe you want to throw in here, is we are a nation of immigrants, and so we're probably more comfortable with doing this sort of thing.
Oh yeah, well, Canada has traditionally been very, very open because there are vast tracts of land.
Correct.
So and need more people.
Right.
Yeah. But
So,
I mean, I think the idea is not necessarily that Eglinton, I can't remember his real name, that not that they were not legally Irish, but they were not considered real Irish. Or their sympathies. They were such Anglophiles that they actually excluded themselves.
Yeah. And a great amount of Irish people, the Irish always sort of say, oh, we never took part in colonialism, but we were the junior partner in the colonialism right around the globe. And loads of Irish people worked as soldiers and sailors and as administrators for the empire. And they valued that. They thought that was the way of the future and the right way to be. And others disagreed with them. But just going back to the text, you notice the way what Joyce does with AE. AE runs the Irish homestead. And, he's printing all the Dubliners' stories, sort of, the Evelyn and the sisters and that, you know, and he A.E. just makes a quick exit, you know, he doesn't get into any controversies, which is kind of interesting. George Russell, that is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He becomes impatient and he just leaves on page 2 or 3.
One of the most playful lines, by the way, before I get to that point, Orla, thank you for raising the issue of who's Irish, because it becomes, it's so pertinent in this novel, and it becomes to play such a huge role, particularly in the Polyphemus, in the One-Eyed Cyclops, in the Cyclops chapter, you know, who is Irish, and it's something that faces a lot. So it's, I mean, it's worth raising. I was just gonna say that I think for me, the most playful line in this chapter is AEIOU.
Yeah. You see, that's it, and he does owe him.
He does.
For publishing.
AEIOU. You know?
I owe you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and that whole fancy dance about the molecules changing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, which is, you know, this is considered a very difficult episode. But in one way it's difficult because, I mean, a lot of it's happening totally in Stephen's head. And others, it's happening in the discussion. And some of the references, it is true that, you know, Stephen is playing with them. He's using this as an opportunity to see how far he can get away. It really reminds me of sometimes when we were in the student union back in the student days and we were a little stoned and we would get into these highly convoluted conversations with a lot of wordplay and teasing and all that kind of thing. I have a question though. Is there any indication whether this was a planned meeting? I mean, was this like the literary group meeting in the library, or just people happened? This was a room where people would just come in and out and sometimes get into conversation.
Well, there's no evidence that I aware of that was by appointment. It just seemed to be a place that people went, the regulars there.
Okay.
Knew each other, and like there were basically nothing like telephones, there no mobile phones to say, you know, there's a thing on tonight. Like certainly when I was, you know, a teenager and hanging around the city centre and that, you know, you went where your friends were.
Where you could go.
That's where you got your information about what was on. If you didn't show up, you'd show up tomorrow or the day after, and just walk around, you'd meet friends, and that's how you got your news. And it sounds like that's sort of a thing. They you know, they go over there to, what's Casey's phrase, to break a lance with each other.
Yeah. And I'm just going to assume that actually that there would be kind of understood that on certain days of the week, there was a good chance you would find some conversation people hanging out in the library. But the question that comes to my mind is, you know, Bloom comes into the library and you indicated that this library is almost like a club for
it's far from it. In the photographs, it's as it is today, and it's lines of these green lamps, you know, and people reading. But there is a desk where you go up and you quietly say, I'm looking for the Irish Times from 1926, February. And they go off to get the what do you call the
archivist?
Yeah, a microfiche, you know, and that, but you don't shout across the room saying, "How you Donna, you know, it's your pissed off. There'd be nothing like that. But there is a room. I've never been in it, but there's a room off it. They closed the library once for creditors from Swedish. We did and performed. This is one of the little playlets. Performed this, you know, in where people read. So it was all wrong, you know, because I have no idea the size scale of the room. It very small room.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they, you know, you're straight into the head. You're in someone's head right at the start. You know, there's a thought there of two words, two left. That's a full sentence. And you don't know whose head that is. Obviously, it's Stephen's, but you haven't yet to discover that because his name isn't mentioned. Smile, smile, Cranley, smile. That's in internal monologue.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of Stephen in here, which is, you know, I would say this is probably confusing to people who've only reading it for the first time or the first couple of times, and learning how to detect when it's a dialogue thing and when it's some internal thing.
And if you missed the first episode, you wouldn't know about Cranley's smile, you know, which that was a thought Stephen had out of the tower. But Mulligan said always like Cranley's smile, Cranley's arm, and so that then you kind of, but it is certainly it's confusing from the start. But that's the theme of Scylla and Charbydis invading the text again, you know. Like,
And reality itself is confusing.
Yeah.
If we want to get down to brass tacks, I mean, this is the way that the real world works.
Yeah.
It's not laid out logical with all the facts apparent.
No, it's always you discover that things aren't where they're supposed to be as you go around, and you know, you're standing stop for half an hour before someone tells you they're on strike and all this sort of thing. You know, you just don't have to.
Yeah. And I appreciate all the little well, like let's look on page 165. That's right when the issue things, and it's in Stephen's head. Stephen says, "Mulligan has my telegram. Folly, persist." So Stephen is encouraging himself to, you know, kind of push on something here, just for effect. And then all of his little jokes about Russell, you know, Russell oracled out of his shadow. And then very soon after that, it's a little way. There's a thing where he's talking about also Russell, the auric egg of Russell warned occultly. I don't know. Russell was bald-headed or not?
Don't know. Imagine so.
Gotta go, folks. Good night.
Bye, Donna.
Okay.
See you next week.
See ya.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Could you say something about the building itself? Because was it a bank, or was it the former House of Parliament, or am I thinking of some other place?
Oh, it's a building. Oh, pity Donna's gone. It's purpose built as a library. There are two. It's a very beautiful building.
Okay.
It's one of two matching buildings. The other is the National Museum, and they look onto each other with porticos, beautiful curved portico, and what's now the House of Parliament is in between the two of them in reset. So it's a very beautiful building. And I just can't remember what's the famous architect of Dublin, but it's by him. And no, let me not. The Samuel Beckett's father, who had was in the construction business, was connected with the construction of it. His grandfather, I think, you know. But there's a sort of a literary connection like that, and it was originally the Royal Dublin Society, between the two of them, that decided to create a library and a museum.
I have a photo labeled National Library Dublin and Kildare Street. And I'm going to do the share screen thing. See if I can do that.
The architect is Thomas Newenham Dean.
Dean,
And I had to look
Dean.
that up.
Yeah, and he did the work down in Trinity College. He also built a lot of Oxford University. A famous character. There you go. That's
Now, is this the building we're talking about?
That's still the same today.
Okay.
And there's an identical matching building to the right of your screen with the same curvature.
Okay. Okay.
And that's where Bloom is looking at the statues, you see?
Okay. Now, is it in this kind of rounded front
Well, that's
part?
it there. Yeah, yeah. Can you see
Okay.
where the carriage is on the left?
Yes.
That's where the entrance is now.
Okay.
But the carriage where the two ladies are standing would look like two ladies.
These
That's
here
now
by the
entrance.
gate?
Yeah, that is now the entrance to the Parliament. But back in the day, if you go far right, you can see an entrance there, I think. Can you see a little gate where your arrow is now?
Maybe here.
That's now the entrance to the museum. And I imagine so there you go. But it's a very large building as well. When you're in there, it's quite magnificent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So am I to understand that from your previous description that the rounded building beneath the two squared buildings, that rounded building is the Irish Parliament?
No, the Irish Parliament is not in the photograph.
It's not.
Yeah,
Okay,
Irish
thank you.
Parliament yeah, it's outside of it.
It is.
So this
Okay.
is like a city center public
Got it.
building
Yeah.
type spaces.
So it's three buildings at once.
Got it.
Leinster House, and which was the Royal Dublin Society, and then these structures. I mean, you see the wealth that was involved in creating this library. You know, like that was not a that was not, you know, kind of a mass-produced item. All the craftsmen.
Right. This is a very unique.
Yeah, and very atmospheric.
Mm-hmm.
In there, for a great place for literature and study, and you know, obviously it's got, I don't know what happened post-COVID, but you know, it had a coffee shop and that sort of thing, and a great place to sit and chat with people. And there's a photograph of Joyce outside it, with his friends. And that's the portico in Stephen Hero. Do you remember where the girls were standing with their umbrellas?
Yes. Yes.
That'd be that portico of the circular building we're looking at.
Okay.
You see, the kind of university types are going in there. They cross.
Yeah, actually, Trinity is quite close to this, right?
Trinity be off to the left. Yeah, and a short walk. So that's it, and well worth going in there. You know, you can. You just want to.
I don't know if you ever heard of Anthony Cronin.
Oh, Anthony Cronin.
Yeah. I think I've told some people this before, but I went to a lecture he gave in the National Library. And it was about his younger days when he was, he'd been some sort of civil servant and given up and had gone, you know, and everybody in Dublin was living in bedsits, they'd no money, they were all writers, and there was, I think there was, they were all hoping to get into magazines like The Bell and stuff like that. So every day they would go into the National Library because it was warm, they'd reading cards, and how they all met each other was out on the steps smoking cigarettes.
Yes.
And none of them had any money, and they used to then go off in the evenings to bars. So they saved money by staying in the library all day. So when I see in this book that they're reading the newspapers, they're going in for something to do.
Yes. Well, that's why, I mean, the comparison is a little silly, but at the University of Texas, there used to be an open kind of coffee shop type thing, rather big. And that's how we used that as our meeting place for almost everything. And when I was an undergraduate there, I mean, geez, it was not uncommon for me to spend 4 to 6 hours a day in there drinking coffee, and there's a continual parade of people. We were all, quote, intellectuals, and we wanted to talk about things. And so we had this, conversation that would just go through the day and then every day of the week. And, you know, so I get that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Anthony Cronin went on to become an advisor on the arts to a politician that had scandal all about him. And because of Anthony Cronin, they brought in this thing called Eisdóna, which is sort of like the dole for artists. So they don't, once you become an established artist, you get a stipend.
Yeah.
And that was all due to that man and his youthful experiences of having to stay in the library all day because they couldn't keep warm.
Yeah.
Did he not?
Sorry, go on. Sorry,
No,
Doug.
no, please, Joe.
I was just going to say Anthony Cronin is one of the two biographies of Samuel Beckett, and his writing of Samuel Beckett's biography is terrific. He's also, isn't he in that 1954 first Bloomsday photograph at the tower in on Sandy Mount Tower, not Sandy Cove, the Sandy Mount Tower where they took the photograph.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, he's definitely in it because we reproduced the photograph, a crowd of us, and I did Anthony Cronin for the 60th anniversary of something. I don't know what we were doing, and we got it in the newspapers. But he was a writer in his own right. He was a very good poetry.
Yeah, so I'm going. This is a documentary. I'm going to put this link in. Anthony Cronin documentary on Patrick Kavanagh, Brendan Behan, and Flann O'Brien.
Yeah.
And he appears in it as well, if I'm not mistaken. And I just got to get my head on straight.
Who's he in that with?
Who's he in there with? He actually has the people themselves.
There's two, yeah.
So you see Patrick Kavanagh and you see Flann O'Brien and
But
Brendan Behan.
Anthony is an old man in that, and he's got another old man who's part of that set. Anyway, here we go.
Yeah, so
It's
if you
very
go to the
touching.
chat and you click on this, your browser will open it up, and then you can save it to look at later. It's an interesting film.
Oops, Daisy, stop.
Everyone.
Oh, sorry
Sorry
about
about
that.
that.
Oh, yeah.
I launched there.
Yeah, unfortunately, it automatically launches, so be aware of that.
But yeah, that's very moving because they're both dead now. And they know a lot about Kavanagh and Brendan Behan. And that first Bloomsday, if we go back to Joyce a bit, who was on at that order? There's Kavanagh, John. That's who he's with. The guy, John, something or other. But
I think it's John Ryan you're talking about, is it?
John,
all the people who used to go Rogan's. John Ryan.
John Ryan, yeah. Paddy Kavanagh, John Ryan himself then, but they couldn't invite Brendan Behan because he didn't get on with Paddy Kavanagh.
Yeah, I think that comes up in the film where they all went to a certain bar, but they didn't necessarily go to the bar at the same time.
Yeah,
in the mornings.
That's right. In Searsons in Bagot Street, that would have been, and there's but if that's the documentary I'm thinking of, it's very moving. But it's the set that come after Joyce.
Yeah.
You know, in the 1940s and 50s.
Yeah.
They're all drinking in the Oval Bar, which is, mentioned
Mm-hmm.
in the last episode we were reading. That's one of their places, all the guys from the Irish Times. And but they're like, John Ryan has a walking stick in that documentary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they've, like, you're getting stories from the horse's mouth there,
Yeah. Yeah. It's very good. And they're all very curmudgeonly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. The
And
McDade.
I appreciate a good curmudgeon myself.
Yeah. Yeah. They
Sorry,
just
can
drink.
you tell me what it's called? Because I can't copy and paste. I'm on a different bit of
All you have
device.
to do is go to YouTube and type in Anthony Cronin. Hold on, let me. It is called Anthony Cronin documentary on Patrick Kavanaugh, Brendan Behan. So if you type in Cronin documentary Kavanaugh Behan, it'll take you right there. And then the only thing is you'll have to, I had to fool around because it comes in 4 parts. So you'll find it there. Well, we could go on and on and on. There's so much in here. I'll just throw out one more thing. There's this kind of offhanded thing where Buck Mulligan says, "The tramper Singh is looking for you. He said to murder you. He heard you pissed on his hall door in Glassville. He's out in Pampooties to murder you." And this whole thing is just chock full of all these little, you know, little things. I mean, they refer, Buck Mulligan goes, "You were speaking of the gaseous vertebrae," which I guess was Mulligan's nickname for William Shakespeare, the gaseous vertebrae. So,
John Millington Singh spent a bit of time out on the Aran Islands.
Yeah.
And pamputties were the type of shoes that were worn by the islanders.
see, there you go. We could probably
So I
spend.
doubt that he was wearing pamputties walking around Dublin.
The Singh went to Yeats, as Joyce did, for advice on writing. And Joyce didn't take Yeats's advice. Go west, young man, find the true Irish. And Singh did. That's how he ended up on the Aran Islands.
Yeah, didn't he meet him, and didn't he started off to give him a compliment, but it turned out to be an insult.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah,
It's too late that I met. It's too bad that I met you when you're so old, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's it, Duncan. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. He was going to give Yeats advice. But this is the first Bloomsday. They're the guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is a book by John Ryan, Remembering How We Stood. And it tells the story of those guys. So we have Flann O'Brien is the guy I couldn't remember the name of. But can you imagine A Horse and Carriage in 1954, and you have Paddy Kavanagh, Flann O'Brien, Anthony Cronin, and John Ryan in it, if Brendan had been there, there'd been a punch-up. And then the man who's where my finger is Tom Joyce.
Okay, over on the right there.
Where my finger is, my finger, that guy looking at the camera is Tom Joyce. Just make sure I've got the name. Yes, it is Tom Joyce, who I think is nephew of James Joyce. And as Anthony Cronin said, I don't think he ever read Ulysses.
Yeah,
he's in the first Ulysses photograph. That is not the tower behind them. That is not the tower at Sandy Cove. That's in Telemachus. That's
Okay,
That's
okay,
the
but it
next
is like the tower, is that
oh,
right?
it's identical, and I think
Mhm.
that's tower number 12. Whereas the
Okay,
but that's on the Sandyman Strand. And shortly after that, Pettigrew relieved himself against the wall, and it's in the documentary that you've sent us.
Obviously, copious quantities of pints had been drunk.
Yeah, they didn't finish it. You know, they didn't finish. They weren't able to finish the journey. They got so drunk.
Hmm. Well,
And
this has been lovely. This
Now,
has been
Duncan,
lovely, and you know, I wish we were in the National Library room where we could have a coffee or a beer in hand, and we could just continue on talking about these
well,
matters.
we kind of are. It's sort of that last one he mentions is a guy, just to give the United States a word in, the man from Ohio, J.P. Dunleavy.
Ah, okay.
So he was one of the crowd. You see, that's where he got his inspiration, the Ginger Man.
yes.
Hmm.
Just before you go, Duncan, you did leave us with one loose end. I think I've tied up. AE, the auric egg. You were wondering if AE was bald, so I did a Google image search, and I tell you with a great degree of jealousy that he had a very full head of hair in any of the pictures that I turned up.
Okay, so
Well, there you are.
I wonder why it was referred to as the auric egg then. But anyway, there you go. See, I'm glad you checked that for me because I could have gone through the rest of my life thinking that he was bald.
Thinking that his head looked like mine. Yes.
Poetic
Hmm.
license.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you
And
very much.
we will gather again